Pope Francis is paying a visit to the town of Assisi in the Italian province of Perugia. He's there to commemorate the life of his namesake, St. Francis, who was born in Assisi in the 12th century, becoming one of the most venerated Catholic figures in history. The streets have been decked there with white and yellow Vatican colours. He is the first Pope to take the name of Assisi's most famous son. This was about an hour ago as the Pope began celebrating Mass with me now. To think about what's happening to this papacy, Madeleine Tehan, who's Associate Editor of the Catholic Herald. A radical pontiff, this Madeleine.
Yes, very much so, and I think it's interesting listening to his homily at Mass outside the Basilica today. Two very strong themes seem to be peace and poverty. He's bringing out those two key characteristics of St. Francis of Assisi and using very powerful imagery, talking about an end to war and talking about the blood that covers the earth as a result of war. He's extremely strong in his message.
Hey, you would expect popes to talk about peace, but what's interesting in a sense is some of the uncomfortable choices that this Pope is presenting. For instance, on poverty, for instance, he suggested that old monasteries and convents might be turned into reception centres for refugees, which won't go down necessarily all that well in certain quarters.
No, it won't. And also, he referred earlier to, you know, worldliness being a cancer, which the Church has to reject. Those are very radical, strong messages again. And he wants us to make uncomfortable decisions. I think that's the thing. He wants to make life quite difficult for Catholics in a sense, because he's saying you've got a clear choice. You've got to think about the decisions you're making. You've got to think about the ethics. You've got to think about, are you turning away from the poor man in the street? You know, he's extremely challenging in that sense, and perhaps more so than any pope before him.
Yeah. And how long will he be wearing the tin cross and living in a simple dormitory and all that stuff?
I don't think that will ever change. And I think also people forget that the reason he does live in that dormitory is that he likes community. He likes to be with other people. He said it's actually bad for his mental health to be on his own. He likes to be surrounded by people. He's a friendly pope. He's a personable man. And I think that will continue. And also be interesting to see if other popes follow his example. I think he's set a precedent now where it might be very difficult almost for a pope then to take up the papal apartments and the fancy cars and all the other things which Pope Francis has rejected. I think he's sending out a clear signal for the future of the Church, and I think it's very significant that he's just come from a 3-day summit with the Council of Cardinals, which he created, and that was all about rebuilding the Church as St. Francis of Assisi tried to do himself.
And one other thing this Pope has said we should all do less of is gossip. How's that gone down in the newsroom at the Catholic Herald?
Well, it's been a challenge, but we strive to not gossip and to follow what Pope Francis says on that.
If you want to hear some gossip, you just stay in this newsroom, Madeleine. Thanks very much indeed. Madeleine Tehan from the Catholic Herald.